Well, hello everybody. It's time for me to build a new bed for my daughter. She, of course, was in her crib for 2 or 3 years or whatever, and then it got converted into a day bed, and she's been in that day bed ever since. We've been waiting for her to tell us when she wanted to upgrade to a bigger bed, and that time has come. And she just turned 7, if you guys can believe that. So this is going to be a big build for this bed. Of course, what she picked out and what she wanted is really intense. I'm going to make it. It is not going to be extremely detailed, or it would just take forever to get this done. I'm just going to kind of bullet show before and afters and whatnot and get this thing put together. So let's get underway. Alright, well, the room's messy, but here's what I'm working with. The bed has to go back in this corner and run down this wall. It's a pretty small room, so there's a lot of obstacles. This is the only place we could put it. The main issue is the ladder access for the attic is right here, so the whole front is in the way and I won't be able to get that down. I'll show you how I'm going to get around that. And then of course we have a ceiling fan up here, which is going to be close as well, but that's where it has to go in the room, and that's what I'm dealing with. Alright, well this is basically the bed that she's fell in love with. This is from the UK somewhere, maybe in Britain. It's retail, I guess, for £1,850. So about 2,600 US dollars. I'm not going to be anywhere close to that, but couldn't really get it anyway, let alone if I was willing to spend the money. I tried to negotiate with her on simpler designs and whatnot, and she's pretty tough, so she won. So here's another image of it. You can see how the bed and this headboard and sideboard come out. My design does not do that, nor would I have the luxury of putting them separately like this in the room. So with that being said, there's some changes that I've made. I've moved the ladder, moved the entry hole, removed this, and just kind of made some different design element changes that I liked better. So where I started was doing a 3D mock-up of the physical room itself. You can see the areas in here. There's the pull-down ladder, which is going to be an issue. Past that, that is where I came up with the actual bed itself. Trying to pull the right one up here. Here we go. This is the design right here. You can see that there's clearly going to be an issue here with this front. Like I said, I moved the ladder to this side. Reason being, that's to give space for a little nightstand right here. I've added this little door right here, which will be held on with magnets, and that's to give us storage space underneath the bed. I'm not going to go really hard off into all the design elements, but I just kind of wanted to point out a few things. So let me switch over here to the mock-up assembly, and let me punch a couple of these walls out so we can get a better view in here. Try to get this out of the way. Okay. Alright, so now I've got it in there. Clearly you can see that that ladder access is not going to work. This disc is the ceiling fan right here, hanging down from the ceiling. It is going to clear no problem. So I'm going to show you what I'm doing to get around this problem and still yet fit the bed in the room. So let me move over to another thing here. I have to switch back and forth on some of this stuff, so bear with me. Okay, there's the master. Okay. You can see these two holes right here. There's one there, one there. Those are just going to simply have bolts in them. And once I remove those two bolts, this piece will start lifting off. And you can see it comes off. And you see these two dowel pins right here? These are going to be steel dowel pins. So after that's removed, then this arch right here will come out of the way. And then this jamb will slide up and out of the way. And it too has two steel dowel pins in the bottom right here. So once that comes up, this wall will simply slide out of the way. and open up the entire front of that. I want to make sure I get these shoved way out of the way. So let me go back to this other mock-up assembly here. I believe that's the one. And yes to the changes. Okay, so now you can see all these components are now taken out, and I've got access to get up into my attic. I didn't want to have to do this, but I don't have a choice. So that's what we're doing there. So moving back into the master assembly here, it's simply going to go back in the reverse order. I'll start by putting in this wall panel with the window. The arch will, the jamb will come down, followed by the arch, and then the top will go back on. So everything here is simply secured by those two bolts. So it's only going to take me a matter of a minute or so to get those bolts out and get everything apart so I can go up and down out of the attic, which only happens a few times a year anyway. So last view here, let's see, explode. Okay. This is not entirely accurate, but I'm just going to explode it out. This is basically, or these are basically all the sub-assemblies here of the bed. I have to make all of these pieces. And these little things hovering up in space, those are the plugs that go inside of these columns, so they won't be here when it's finalized. So it's going to have to also be built modular, which is why you see it this way. I have to get it in there, I have to put it together, and I have to be able to take it apart and move it if we ever move. So a lot more design went into it to make sure everything comes apart. And on the sideboards, you can kind of, headboard and sideboards, you can kind of see the details here. There's going to be a cap rail here, which wasn't on the original design, with a little cove underneath, kind of doll that up. There's going to be a bunch of grooves here and there for panels and things like that. The ladder assembly right here. I'm just kind of giving an overview. I'm not going into detail, like I said, on the entire build. There's the back wall with the window, the railing. That's all one assembly there put together. It will be doweled in. It will be fastened in the bottom in some manner. Haven't figured that out yet. This upper deck will be all one unit. This assembly all up here is one unit. You know, kind of awkward, bulky pieces, but can be done, especially with two people. So that is what we're going to build, guys. I'm going to give you one final shot of the design. And I believe this is 187 or 178, one of those two individual pieces of wood. That's not including fasteners and screws and bolts and T-nuts and things like that. That's just the wood components that I have to make. Well, I've rifled through my stash of wood and pulled all these pieces out, which are going to be milled down and changed into various parts of the bed. All this stuff I just acquired from investment properties and stuff like that. I don't have a dime in any of it, so it's time to put it to good use. This little stack of 1x12s is also going to get resawn and changed into various parts. It's kind of rough looking because it's got paint on it and everything, but you'll never know when I'm finished that this used wood here was part of it. Alright, well, I've got my plywood. Just if you guys didn't know, you can get sheets of Baltic birch 4x8 instead of just the 5x5s. It's kind of hard to find. There's a distributor in my area, but I had to go through a lumber yard, and then I did a will call pickup and went and picked it up. So this is 2 sheets of 3/4 Baltic birch. That's going to be columns and the platform and a lot of miscellaneous components. This is a sheet of 1/2 inch or 15/32. I think they call it sand ply. Got this from Home Depot or Lowe's. This is going to be where the bed sits on the platform. And then I've got 2 1/2-inch sheets of Baltic birch, which is going to be like walls and other things. So we went ahead and ordered and got the mattress just so I can make sure everything is going to fit. So I'm kind of building it around that with just a little bit of wiggle room. So it's time to start laying out and knocking these sheets down to more manageable pieces. Let's get underway. All right, well, once I got everything finalized in my drawings, sketches, this, that, and the other, I use this program called Cut List. I'm going to talk a little bit about it because I've got some tips that I've discovered over the years of using it that might come in handy to other folks that might have it already. But all of my pieces were put in here, as you can see. It may not show up well on the screen, but anyway, like the column vertical pieces, they're made out of 4 pieces each, so I need 16, and it's out of a sheet good of a material named 3/4 ply. So all these pieces were entered into this system. Then you can notice on these layout tabs, if you pick, let's say for example, 3/4 ply, there are 2 layouts in here for all the components I need in the bed. But you'll notice this one up here that is unplaced. That is because, excuse me, you cannot do triangles in this program. If you could, then this piece would fit right here. These are the peaks for the small and the big wall. I know I can physically get that small peak and the big peak out of this area. I just can't place it on here. I've also added in here this track. There's one piece of track here, and on this other piece there's a track right here. I'm making a track to run my circular saw down out of this material so I can process this material. I'm tired of using the straight edge and the clamps and measuring my blade offset and whatnot, so I'm going to make a zero clearance track. Excuse me. So this is where I'm going to start by knocking these sheets down, but I'm going to start by building this track. I may or may not outline it in another video after I get it built, but moving on. The 1/2" ply here, you can see I need 2 pieces for this layout, and I've got a lot of waste here. This what's called OSB. It's not really OSB. I just put it in a different category. This is the platform deck of where the mattress will sit. But here's an issue with this program. You've got raw materials, and let's say if you just went down into dimensional lumber, into pine, okay? They've got all these different widths and lengths and things in here, and you can say, I've got X amount of these, and you can check a box that says you can buy more, and it will add them to your bill of materials, but it will try to use what you have first. The problem in this program is if you have a specific board and you say, I have this board that's 33 inches long and I want to get these 2 pieces out of it, you can't pick the specific board out of this inventory to use for your layout. So the way I get around that is, and I'll show you up here, where I have 1x2 or 1/2 by 2 window trim. I am pulling those out of 1x2 material, and I have 5 of them. So I create a new category here and name it whatever I want to kind of associate the piece to that wood. And then if I go to my layouts and I pick my 1/2 by 2 window trim, you can see my 5 layouts here. So that's how I get this program, cheat it so to speak, to make it do what I want to do. If I just put all these in one category, they're kind of all over the place. And I have a lot of those in here. You can see like the 1/2 by 3/4 trim divides. It's out of a different category that I created. Here's my 1x12 material that I'd shown. So here's the layout for those 5 boards of what I'm going to be knocking these pieces from. You can also, in your raw materials, like on this first one, there's a saw curve that you put in there, and it will accommodate for the cuts to make sure you have enough board for the parts. But you can also put in part padding. let's say I want an 1/8 inch padding on this, on all of these parts, it's going to add an 1/8 inch to each side and each end. So it's actually going to be a 1/4 inch wider in both directions. I do that so I can rough cut my parts down, and then I can process them further to bring them into final dimension. And that also helps accommodate for joining and planing, to give you a little bit of extra, not necessarily in the thickness, but in the width, of course, when you're joining things. And you clean up an edge, and then you need a little bit more to straighten that up with the table saw. I'm kind of rambling on here, but I just wanted to kind of point that in there. So I'm not going to be coming back and referencing these layouts through my build. I'm just basically going to say I am making these pieces, and here they are. So all of these components have been put in here based on the inventory I have, and I've got all my layouts for each and every one of these ready to go. Another cool thing about this is if you do have some inventory, when you look at your bill of materials, let's say for sheet goods, for example, I didn't have any in inventory, but if you click that you can buy more, it will give you the count of what you need to buy. What I wish the program would do was bring the bill of materials all into one screen, so you can see the sheet goods and the dimensional lumber all on one, and you could print this, take it, and get your materials. As they have it set up, you have one tab for sheet goods and one for dimensional lumber. So you can see on dimensional lumber, I have to buy zeros. I do have cove in here of one count that I need to buy. I'm probably going to make that out of my scrap pieces around here, as well as I went ahead and put in quarter round, which I'll probably end up making as well. So to date, my to purchase list was the 5 sheets of plywood I'd shown. So now I get to go out and start processing all of these things and turning them into the components. A lot of them will be taken down to final dimension as they come into play in my mock-up build, just for little variances and things like that that might happen along the way. I'm leaving myself enough room to accommodate for those. Alright guys, well I got all the 3/4 inch plywood knocked down. I'm going to hold off on the 1/2 inch until I get there. I might as well just measure them and cut them to size rather than break them down large and then process them again. Didn't make any sense to me. So far this is all my scrap. Little strip, a little piece, and this little pile of business here. Alright, well I'd mentioned earlier that the first thing I was going to do was make a track saw out of some cutoffs of this 3/4 inch birch. What I was going to end up with turned out not to be wide enough for what I wanted to do, so I held off on that. I was able to rearrange my sheets and get a long section that's just over 6 inches wide, and then I took 6 inches off the end of one board. This is going to end up being in total 10 feet long when I finish building it. It's going to have a 6-foot section that I can use to rip down 4-foot sheets of plywood while still giving me a foot on either end of the board, so I can set the saw on and have an in feed, and then when I get to the other side I'll have an out feed and the saw can just sit there. And then I'll have a 4-foot section I can hook up to it, and that'll give me the same scenario, a foot on either end of a full 8-foot sheet. And then the small 4-foot section I can use for smaller projects or cutting off bottoms of doors or things like that. Alright, well this is my down and dirty saw guide here. I didn't have any material that was wide enough, so you can see I just used 2 pieces here and let it overhang each other. I started with this piece, which was I cut perfectly straight, and then left a little bit proud of my saw blade measuring off my saw, and then I glued and screwed this together down its length, and then finally took my saw in and knocked off this edge to make it straight. So now I can just line up right here to my marks and run the saw, and we're good to go. But you can see I don't have any clamping here, the clamps I have would interfere with the saw, which is why I left it like this. So I took a little piece of scrap, so when I set it up, I just simply put this under the back and then clamp it down, and it's ready to go. So this is just a quick example on what I did. I just ran drywall screws in there that stuck out the other side, and then came back in with my angle grinder and just dressed them off just below the surface. That was quick, fast, and easy to do because I needed to get rolling on cutting things. Alright, well, I'm starting to break down all my dimensional lumber into the pieces I need. I'm not going in any particular order other than just following the list. I started off with material that looked like that, stained, little warped, bowed, twisted, stuff like that. I got all these pieces milled out of those. They turned out quite nice. All this stuff over here was already to the dimension I needed, and they were all relatively straight and square and true, so I just cut all that down to length. I need to reprocess this stack right here because they're going to be half by half. I just need to simply run them through the table saw real quick. I may even wait to do that to the point where I put them on. Alright, well, next on my list is knocking all this 1x12 material down into rough dimensions. I'm going to start by cutting them off into whatever widths they're supposed to be padded on all sides. That way it'll reduce the amount of joining I need to do to flatten a face because these are cupped. The thinner you can make your boards, or the narrower out of wide stock, you can maintain your thickness a little better. I'm calling for 3/4 thickness in my design, but I'll probably end up with a little less than that after I finish milling all this stuff and making it all flat, square, and true. So I'll just adjust my design as I go and make accommodations for that. I'll show the end results here once I'm finished. Alright guys, well, all this 1x12 material has been knocked down to rough dimensions, length and width. Hard to believe this is the same stuff. As I get to the part in my build where these are going to be processed further, I'll do it at that time, and that's so I can make up for any small variances or things like that that may change over my actual dimensions that I drew out. Alright, well, I'm going to attack these two small stacks here. These are going to make up the ladder. These are the uprights, these are the rungs. This is some pretty rough stuff. This was parts of two pocket doors that I'd removed quite some time back in a property. It's not going to clean up entirely pretty. It's got a lot of holes and things that need to be filled, so I'm going to make them the best that I can, and then they'll have a little bit of body work here and there filling those holes and whatnot, but all in all, it should turn out and work out just fine. This material for the ladder actually cleaned up a lot better than I anticipated. I've got some holes to fill here and there, but other than that, it turned out quite nice. Alright, well, I went ahead and cut all this joist material to length. These things are in pretty bad shape. They are super twisted, bowed, but not really that crooked. I don't know if I'm going to be able to massage these upright and get the twist out. I'll try that at that time, but I may have to source out more material for these. I'm not real satisfied with those, but they might work. And then this stack here, I may or may not find a new piece of wood for these either. These are just spacers that go in between these. They're just not all to width yet.